Take a deep breath with me right now. Just one slow, gentle breath. You're here tonight because something inside you recognizes a familiar pattern. That frustrating, exhausting experience of wanting to move forward in your life, knowing exactly what you need to do, maybe even having the skills and resources to do it, but finding yourself completely stuck, frozen, as if some invisible force field surrounds you, keeping you in place no matter how much your logical mind pushes and pleads. Maybe you're lying here tonight after another day of promising yourself you'd finally make that phone call, start that project, have that conversation, apply for that opportunity, or take that first small step toward the life you actually want. And instead, you found yourself scrolling endlessly, organizing things that didn't need organizing, or suddenly becoming fascinated by tasks that normally bore you to tears. Anything but the thing that matters. You might be beating yourself up right now, wondering what's wrong with you, why you can't just do what needs to be done like other people seem to do so effortlessly. But here's what I want you to know tonight. There is nothing wrong with you. This paralysis, this inability to move even when you desperately want to, isn't a character flaw or a sign of weakness. It's not laziness. And it's not because you don't care enough. Tonight, you have permission to stop fighting yourself. You have permission to be curious instead of critical about this pattern that's been running your life. You have permission to discover that the part of you keeping you stuck might actually be trying to protect you in ways you haven't fully understood yet. And most importantly, you have permission to find a gentler way forward, one that honors both your desire to grow and your need to feel safe. There's no pressure here tonight, no demands that you change by morning or fix yourself before you fall asleep. We're simply going to explore, with tremendous compassion, why movement feels so dangerous to part of you, and how you might begin to negotiate with that protective part instead of battling it. What you're experiencing has a name in psychology. It's often called approach avoidance conflict. Carl Jung wrote extensively about how the psyche naturally resists change, even positive change, because change represents the unknown, and the unknown triggers our most primitive survival instincts. Your nervous system doesn't distinguish between physical danger and emotional risk. It simply knows that staying exactly where you are has kept you alive so far. Brené Brown talks about this too. How we often get stuck right at the edge of our comfort zones, not because we lack courage, but because some part of us correctly recognizes that growth requires vulnerability, and vulnerability means we might get hurt. Your paralysis isn't pathological. It's intelligent. It's your system's way of saying, wait, let's think about this. What if moving forward means we lose something important? What if we're not ready? What if we fail spectacularly and everyone sees? This is why pushing yourself harder rarely works long term. When you try to force movement through willpower alone, you're essentially declaring war on the part of you that's trying to keep you safe. And that protective part has access to all your body's systems, your energy, your motivation, your focus, your creativity. It can make your limbs feel like lead, your brain like fog, your goals feel suddenly meaningless or impossible. But here's what's fascinating. This same protective mechanism that keeps you stuck is also incredibly sophisticated and wise. It's been studying your life, noticing patterns, calculating risks based on your unique history and current circumstances. It knows things your conscious mind might have forgotten or dismissed. Maybe it remembers the time you tried something new and got criticized. Maybe it's aware of how much other people in your life seem to need you to stay exactly as you are. Maybe it's noticed that every time you've grown in the past, you've had to leave something behind, and it's not convinced you're ready for that kind of loss again. Tonight, Instead of trying to override this protective part, we're going to get curious about it. We're going to listen to what it's trying to tell you. Because when you understand the logic behind your paralysis, when you appreciate the intelligence in your resistance, something remarkable happens. The grip begins to loosen naturally. You see, the part of you that wants to move forward and the part that keeps you stuck aren't actually enemies. They're both trying to serve you, trying to make sure you not only survive but thrive. The problem is they've been operating from different information, different timelines, different definitions of safety and success. Tonight, we're going to help them start communicating with each other. This isn't about becoming a different person or fixing something broken in you. This is about integration, bringing all parts of yourself into collaborative relationship so that movement becomes possible without feeling dangerous, so that growth can happen without the system-wide resistance that's been exhausting you. The paralysis you experience isn't your enemy. It's been your bodyguard. Unlike any good bodyguard, it needs to be convinced that the new direction you want to go is actually safer than staying put. It needs updated information, new evidence, a different kind of safety plan. Once it trusts that moving forward won't mean abandoning everything that matters, won't mean facing dangers you're not equipped to handle, the paralysis naturally dissolves. So tonight, we're going to approach this with tremendous gentleness. No forcing, no demanding that you be different by morning. We're simply going to create a safe space where all parts of you can be heard, where the wisdom in your resistance can be acknowledged alongside your genuine desire for growth. Let your body settle more deeply into your bed now. Notice how it feels to give your full weight to the surface beneath you. There's something beautiful about this moment of conscious surrender, choosing to stop holding yourself up, choosing to be supported. This is the same kind of surrender we're inviting tonight with your stuck patterns. Not giving up on your dreams, but giving up the exhausting fight against yourself. As we explore together, you might notice thoughts arising, judgments about why you should already be past this, comparisons to other people who seem to move through life more easily, fear that you'll never change. Just notice these thoughts with curiosity, like clouds passing through the sky of your awareness. They don't need to be fixed or fought. They're just information, just part of the landscape of your experience right now. Your breathing can be your anchor tonight. Whenever things feel too intense or overwhelming, just come back to your breath. Let each exhale be a small release, a little letting go of the pressure you've been carrying. Let each inhale bring in not just oxygen, but also compassion for yourself, patience with your process, trust in your inherent wisdom. We're going to move slowly tonight, giving your nervous system time to adjust, time to recognize that exploration doesn't have to mean exposure. You can learn about your patterns without having to change them immediately. You can understand your protection without having to give it up before you're ready. Think of tonight as a gentle reconnaissance mission into your own inner world. You're not going in to conquer or fix anything. You're going in as a compassionate researcher, curious about how you've been caring for yourself, interested in the strategies your psyche has developed to keep you safe. From this place of genuine curiosity, rather than judgment, real understanding becomes possible. Here's the core insight we'll be exploring tonight. Your paralysis is not random. It's not a glitch in your system or a sign that you're broken. It's an intelligent response to information your protective parts have gathered about what movement has meant in your life, what it might cost you, what dangers it might expose you to. Imagine for a moment that deep inside you lives a wise, ancient part that has been with you since childhood, carefully observing every time you've tried to grow, every time you've taken risks, every time you've been vulnerable. This part has been taking notes, building a sophisticated risk assessment system based on your actual lived experience. When it senses you're about to move into new territory, it quickly runs through its database. Last time we tried something like this, here's what happened. The time before that, this was the consequence. Based on historical data, here's the probability of various outcomes, and sometimes, often without your conscious awareness, this protective part concludes, it's safer to stay put. Yes, staying stuck is uncomfortable, but it's a known discomfort. Movement might bring unknown pain, rejection, failure, or loss that we're not sure we can handle. This isn't your enemy speaking. This is your most devoted guardian, using the best information it has to keep you safe. Tonight, we're going to help update that information. We're going to show this protective part that you've grown since those early experiences, that you have new resources now, new support systems, new ways of handling challenges. We're going to negotiate a new agreement about what safety looks like and how movements can happen without abandoning the care this part has been providing. The metaphor I want to offer you tonight is that of a negotiation between different aspects of yourself. Not a hostile takeover where growth conquers protection, but a collaborative meeting where all voices are heard and a mutually beneficial path forward is found. By the end of our time together, you'll understand not just why you've been stuck, but how to move forward in a way that honors both your need for growth and your need for safety. Let yourself sink even deeper now, knowing that understanding is the first step toward gentle, sustainable change. Tonight, we're planting seeds of insight that will continue to grow long after you fall asleep. Your unconscious mind is already beginning to process this new way of thinking about your paralysis, already starting to imagine what movement might feel like when it doesn't have to mean abandoning your protective wisdom. Take another slow breath, and let's begin this journey of understanding together. Maybe you recognize this scene. It's Sunday evening, and you're looking at the week ahead. There's that one thing. Could be a difficult conversation you need to have, a creative project that's been calling to you, an application you need to submit, or simply a phone call that could change everything. You feel it there in your chest, that mix of excitement and terror. You know it's important. Part of you genuinely wants to do it. You even have a plan. Monday morning arrives, and you wake up with that familiar sensation. Like your body is made of thick honey, your mind is crystal clear about what needs to happen, but your limbs feel impossibly heavy. You sit at your desk, computer open, phone within reach, and suddenly discover 17 other urgent tasks that absolutely must be done first. You organize your email. You research something completely unrelated. You find yourself deep in a conversation with a neighbor about their garden renovation, genuinely interested, but dimly aware that you're hiding from something. By evening, that thing is still undone, and the familiar voice in your head begins its commentary. You're so lazy. You're self-sabotaging again. Why can't you just do what needs to be done? Other people don't struggle like this, but here's what that critical voice doesn't understand. You weren't being lazy. You were being protective. Something in your system detected danger in that forward movement and activated your most sophisticated avoidance systems. Or maybe you know this pattern. You're in a meeting, and someone asks for volunteers for a project you're actually passionate about. Your heart leaps. This is exactly the kind of opportunity you've been wanting. Your mouth opens to speak, and then nothing. You sit there, watching someone else raise their hand, feeling like you're behind thick glass, unable to break through to claim what you actually want. Later, you'll tell yourself you weren't ready, didn't have time, probably wouldn't have been good at it anyway. But the truth is more complex. Part of you is ready, And another part was terrified of what being seen, being chosen, being responsible might cost you. Perhaps you recognize the pattern of the endless preparation phase. You want to start a business, write a book, learn a new skill, change careers. You research everything exhaustively. You buy all the right books, sign up for courses, create elaborate planning documents. You know more about your desired field than people who are already successful in it. But when it comes time to take that first real step, to publish something, to reach out to a potential client, to actually begin, you discover you need just a little more preparation. Just one more course, one more book, one more perfect plan. The particularly cruel version of this paralysis is when you're stuck not moving towards something you want, but stuck enduring something you don't want. Maybe it's a job that drains your soul, a relationship that's become toxic, a living situation that depresses you daily. You know you need to leave. You have the resources, the support, even a clear exit strategy, but every time you start to take action, you find yourself frozen, suddenly able to see all the ways the current situation isn't that bad, all the risks of change, all the reasons to wait just a little longer. And then there's the version where you've actually started moving. You've taken those first brave steps towards something new. And then you inexplicably begin sabotaging your own progress. You stop returning important calls. You miss deadlines you could easily meet. You pick fights with people who are trying to help you. You create chaos or crisis that requires all your attention, making forward movement impossible. It's as if part of you is deliberately pulling the emergency brake on your own life. What all these scenarios have in common, that they're not actually about lacking motivation, discipline, or capability. They're about a sophisticated internal system that has concluded, often without your conscious awareness, that movement in the desired direction represents some form of threat. This system is so intelligent that it can create paralysis that feels completely real and immovable, even when logically you know you want to act. The reason you can't just push through this paralysis is because it's not coming from your thinking mind. It's coming from much deeper protective instincts. Your nervous system doesn't care about your goals or dreams when it perceives danger. Its job is to keep you alive, and it defines alive as similar to how things have been, because you've survived everything up to this point. But here's what's both fascinating and hopeful about this paralysis. It's evidence of how much your psyche cares about you. Every time you've been stopped from moving forward, even when it's frustrated you, that stopping was an act of care from a part of you that wasn't convinced the movement was safe. Tonight, we're going to honor that care while also updating the information your protective system is working with. Let me tell you about Maya, a gifted artist who lived in a small mountain village surrounded by ancient forests. From childhood, Maya had possessed an extraordinary ability to see the world in ways others couldn't. Colors that danced between the visible spectrum, patterns in nature that revealed deeper truths, connections between seemingly unrelated things that, when painted, could move people to tears or inspire them to completely reimagine their lives. Maya's paintings had power, real power. When she was young and painted freely, sharing her work with innocent enthusiasm, remarkable things happened. A painting of the forest in winter helped her neighbor understand something profound about loss and acceptance that allowed her to finally grieve her father's death. A portrait Maya painted of the baker's hands somehow captured not just their physical form, but the love he put into his bread. And people began traveling from distant villages just to experience the way his food made them feel. But Maya began to notice something troubling. Each time her art touched someone deeply, each time it catalyzed real change in someone's life, something else happened too. People began to look at her differently, some with a kind of awe that made her feel isolated and strange, others with suspicion, as if she possessed something that might be dangerous. Her own family started treating her with a careful distance, unsure how to relate to this child who seemed to see too much, feel too much, create things that affected people in ways that couldn't be easily explained or controlled. The turning point came when Maya was 16. She painted a portrait of her village from a perspective she'd seen in a dream. Not the physical village as it appeared, but the village as it felt, with all its hidden connections, its secret sorrows, its buried joys made visible in swirling colors and impossible geometries. When she showed this painting at the village's annual festival, people were transfixed. They saw themselves in ways they'd never seen before. They understood relationships and patterns that had been invisible to them. But the reaction wasn't entirely positive. Some people felt exposed, uncomfortable with having their inner worlds reflected back to them so clearly. Others felt challenged by the way the painting revealed the gaps between how they presented themselves and who they really were. A few influential community members declared that Maya's art was too intense, too revealing, possibly even harmful. They suggested that such powerful work might be better kept private, that maybe Maya should consider a more practical path forward. Maya was devastated. She hadn't meant to make anyone uncomfortable. She'd simply painted what she saw, shared what felt most true and beautiful to her. But now, for the first time, she understood that her gift came with a price, not just for her, but for the people around her. Her art could heal, but it could also disturb. It could inspire, but it could also threaten the comfortable ways people preferred to see themselves and their world. So Maya made a decision that felt both wise and necessary at the time. She would continue painting, but only in private. She would keep her most powerful work hidden, sharing only the safer pieces. Beautiful, but not transformative. Skillful, but not revelatory. She convinced herself this was a mature, responsible choice. She was protecting both herself and others from the discomfort her full artistic power could create. At first, this solution seemed to work. People praised Maya's improved art. It was lovely, accessible, non-threatening. She received commissions, sold pieces at market, earned respect as a talented but safely predictable artist. She told herself she was being smart, practical, considerate of others' needs and limitations. But as years passed, something inside Maya began to wither. The safe art she shared publicly felt increasingly hollow to her. The powerful visions still came, still demanded to be painted, but now they felt dangerous, forbidden. She would start working on these deeper pieces in the privacy of her studio, feeling her soul come alive with the familiar excitement of capturing something true and important. But then, just as the painting began to approach its full power, unfamiliar anxiety would flood her system. What if someone sees this and feels threatened again? What if I hurt someone with this truth? What if sharing this means I lose the acceptance I've worked so hard to rebuild? What if being fully myself means being alone? And so Maya would stop. Sometimes she'd paint over the powerful work with something safer. Sometimes she'd turn the canvas to the wall and tell herself she'd finish it later. Sometimes she'd become, suddenly, inexplicably exhausted and unable to continue working at all. Maya had developed what we might recognize as a sophisticated protection system. The part of her that had been hurt by others' reactions to her full power had learned to intervene before she could create anything that might threaten her sense of belonging and safety. This protective part could make her hands feel clumsy, when she tried to paint her most important visions. It could cloud her mind with doubt just as she approached breakthrough moments. It could create compelling distractions or sudden urgent needs that pulled her away from her easel right when her work was becoming dangerously powerful. Maya wasn't weak or lacking in artistic discipline. She was being protected by a part of herself that had learned, through painful experience, that her full creative power came with social costs she might not be prepared to pay. This protective part had developed an increasingly sophisticated ability to sense when Maya's art was moving toward the kind of truth-telling that had gotten her in trouble before, and it would gently but firmly apply the brakes. The tragedy was that Maya began to believe this protection was simply who she was, someone who started projects but couldn't finish them, someone with talent but not quite enough talent, someone who almost had something important to say but couldn't quite access it. She forgot that her paralysis wasn't a character flaw but an intelligent response to real social dynamics she'd experienced. But Maya's story doesn't end there. One day, an old woman from a neighboring village sought Maya out. She'd heard rumors of paintings that had once moved people to profound healing, and she was desperate. Her granddaughter was dying, not from physical illness, but from a deep spiritual sickness, inability to find meaning or connection in life. The old woman begged Maya to paint something, anything, that might help her granddaughter remember why life was worth living. Maya felt that familiar terror rise in her chest. But looking into the old woman's eyes, she also felt something else, a recognition that her gift had never been meant just for her own safety and comfort. Slowly, carefully, she began to explain to the old woman about the power in her paintings, about the risks, about why she'd learned to keep her most important work hidden. The old woman listened, and then she said something that changed Maya's life. Child, I understand why you learned to protect yourself. But what if the protection that once kept you safe is now keeping you from the very thing you were born to do? What if there are people who need exactly what you've been hiding, who are dying for lack of the medicine art provides? That night, Maya made a different kind of decision. Instead of choosing between full power and safety, she chose to negotiate with her protective part. She acknowledged its wisdom, its good intentions, its legitimate concerns. But she also began to provide it with new information, evidence of her growth, her increased resilience, her expanded support system. She began to show this protective part that hiding her gifts completely was no longer the only way to stay safe. Maya's healing didn't happen overnight, and it didn't mean abandoning the protective wisdom she'd developed. Instead, she learned to move forward with both courage and caution, honoring both her need to express her true gifts and her need to do so in ways that felt sustainable and safe. She began to understand that the paralysis she'd experienced wasn't her enemy. It had been her guardian. Unlike any good guardian, it just needed to be convinced that the new direction was truly safer than staying hidden. Let's breathe together for a moment and gently explore the deepest layer of why movement feels so dangerous to part of you. As you settle more comfortably into your bed, allow your awareness to drift back through your life, not to judge or analyze, but simply to witness with compassion the experiences that taught your system what movement might cause. The first core belief that often creates paralysis is this: if I move forward, if I grow, if I change, I'll lose the people and connections that matter most to me. This isn't usually a conscious thought. It's more like an underground river of anxiety that flows beneath your attempts at progress. A quiet but persistent warning system that activates whenever growth beckons. Don't think about the moments in your life when you did take significant steps forward. Maybe you got promoted at work, or developed a new skill, or gained confidence in some area. What happened in your relationships during those times? Did some people celebrate your growth, while others seemed uncomfortable with your changes? Did you notice certain friends becoming distant when you started pursuing goals they didn't understand or support? Did family members, perhaps without meaning any harm, make comments that suggested they preferred the old version of you? Maybe you remember being a child, excited about some new interest or ability, only to discover that your enthusiasm made others uncomfortable. Perhaps you learned a new word or concept that fascinated you, but when you shared it, adults exchanged glances or told you not to show off. Maybe you excelled at something and noticed how it changed the dynamic with siblings or friends. Suddenly you were the smart one, or the talented one, which felt isolating even when it was meant as praise. Or perhaps your family system had spoken or unspoken rules about not getting too big for your britches, not standing out too much, not changing in ways that might threaten the family's sense of identity or stability. You might have learned that being the same predictable you was how you kept your place in the tribe, how you ensured that love and belonging would continue to flow your way. This belief often develops in families where change is unconsciously experienced as abandonment. When you grow, you might leave certain ways of being behind, certain limitations you used to share with family members. Your growth can inadvertently highlight others' stuckness, making them feel left behind or judged, even when that's not your intention at all. A protective part of you learned to monitor for these relationship disruptions and began creating paralysis as a way to prevent the painful experience of losing connection through growth. The cruel irony is that this protective strategy often ends up creating the very disconnection it's trying to prevent. When you hold yourself back from growth to maintain relationships, you might end up feeling resentful, inauthentic, or increasingly distant from people anyway. But your protective system doesn't understand this paradox. It only knows that staying the same has historically felt safer than risking the unknown consequences of change. Maybe you recognize this pattern in how you navigate opportunities. You get excited about something, a new job, a creative project, a chance to learn something fascinating. But then you start imagining how the people in your life will react. Will your partner feel threatened if you become more confident or successful? Will your friends still relate to you if you develop new interests they don't share? Will your family understand and support this version of who you're becoming? Or will they subtly pressure you to stay who you've always been? Sometimes this belief shows up as a fear of success specifically, because success makes you visible, different, potentially threatening to others' sense of security or self-worth. You might have learned that being powerful, capable, or exceptional comes with a social cost. People relate to you differently, expect more from you, or feel intimidated by your capabilities. So part of you learned to keep yourself small, not from lack of ambition, but from a deep understanding that smallness can be a form of social camouflage that protects your relationships. This protective wisdom made perfect sense when you were young and truly dependent on others for survival and love. A child who threatens the family system's stability or challenges its unspoken rules really could lose essential connection and care. But now, as an adult, this same protective pattern might be keeping you from relationships and opportunities that would actually celebrate and support your growth. The paralysis this belief creates is particularly sophisticated because it often activates right at the moment when real progress becomes possible. Your protective system has learned to scan for signs that you're about to outgrow your current social ecosystem, and it applies gentle but firm pressure to keep you safely within known relationship boundaries. This might feel like sudden lack of motivation, unexpected anxiety about success, or a compelling urge to sabotage your own progress right when things are going well. Understanding this belief with compassion is recognizing that your protective system isn't trying to limit you out of spite or weakness. It's trying to ensure that growth doesn't come at the cost of love and belonging. It's been your relationship guardian, monitoring the social environment for signs that your changes might threaten your most important connections. But here's what your protective system does not have fully grasped yet. As an adult, you have the capacity to choose relationships that support your growth, to communicate about changes in ways that bring people closer rather than driving them away, and to handle the natural evolution that happens in relationships as you grow. The people who truly love you want to see you flourish, and those who don't might not be the right companions for this phase of your journey. Tonight, as you breathe with this understanding, you can begin to thank this protective part for all the ways it's tried to keep you safely connected to others, and you can also begin to provide it with updated information about your current capacity to handle relationship changes, your improved ability to communicate about growth, and your clearer understanding of which connections truly serve your highest good. Breathe deeply and let yourself sink even more completely into the support beneath you. We're moving now into perhaps the most mysterious aspect of your paralysis, the part of you that has learned to associate success, progress, and good things with impending danger or loss. This second core belief often sounds like, if I succeed, if things go too well, if I allow myself to be truly happy or fulfilled, something terrible will happen to balance it out. It's a superstitious seeming, but emotionally real conviction that good things are somehow dangerous, that visibility through success makes you a target, that the universe has a limited supply of good fortune, and taking too much will result in punishment. This belief often has deep roots in your earliest experiences of what happened when things went well. Maybe you remember a time when your family was happy, thriving, feeling secure, and then something devastating happened. An illness, job loss, accident, or major disruption that shattered that security. Your young mind, trying to make sense of the chaos, might have concluded that the happiness itself was somehow dangerous, that feeling safe and successful was what invited the disaster. Or perhaps you grew up in an environment where success was treated with suspicion or anxiety. Maybe a parent would get nervous when things were going too well, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Maybe your family had stories about relatives who got too big for their britches and then faced comeuppance. Maybe there were cultural or religious messages about pride coming before a fall, about not standing out too much, about the dangers of having more than others. Sometimes this belief develops from witnessing what happened to others in your family or community when they became successful. Did they face criticism, jealousy, or social isolation? Did their success come with costs that looked frightening to your young eyes? Broken relationships, health problems, loss of privacy, or increased pressure and responsibility? Your protective system might have concluded that success itself was the cause of these problems rather than simply correlated with them. This belief can also form from experiences of survivor guilt, situations where your success or good fortune came at a time when others around you were struggling. Maybe you received opportunities that siblings didn't get, or you thrived while friends were failing, or your family succeeded while your community suffered. Part of you might have learned that doing well while others don't feels dangerous, disloyal, or somehow wrong, leading to an unconscious commitment to limit your own success to avoid these uncomfortable feelings. The paralysis this creates is particularly cruel because it activates precisely at moments when success becomes real and tangible. You might work hard toward a goal for months, handling the struggle and uncertainty just fine. But then, when the breakthrough actually happens, when the promotion is offered, when the relationship gets serious, when the creative project gains recognition, suddenly you're flooded with anxiety, dread, or a compulsive urge to sabotage what you've built. Your nervous system has learned to interpret the feeling of success as a warning signal. The better things get, the more hypervigilant your protective system becomes, scanning for dangers, expecting catastrophe, preparing for loss. This might show up as insomnia when things are going well, difficulty enjoying positive experiences, or a tendency to create problems or chaos right when life starts feeling too good. Sometimes this belief manifests as an unconscious commitment to struggle. If struggle feels safer than success, part of you will create just enough obstacles, delays, or complications to keep you in the familiar territory of working toward, rather than having achieved. The paralysis becomes a way to hover perpetually on the edge of success without ever having to face the imagined dangers of actually arriving there. You might recognize this in how you handle compliments, recognition, or opportunities. When someone acknowledges your talents or achievements, do you feel anxious rather than pleased? When doors open for you, do you find reasons why you're not ready to walk through them? When life starts flowing easily, do you become suspicious, waiting for the inevitable difficulty that will restore the familiar balance of struggle? This protective strategy made sense if your early environment really was unstable or dangerous, if success really did correlate with increased vulnerability, or if visibility really did invite criticism or attack. Your system learned to keep you safely below the radar, in the zone where good things could happen, but not so many good things that you'd attract unwanted attention or trigger some form of retribution. But this same protection can become a prison when it prevents you from receiving the very experiences your soul most wants: meaningful work, loving relationships, creative fulfillment, the satisfaction of using your gifts in service of something larger than yourself. The paralysis keeps you safe from imagined future catastrophes, but trapped in a present that never quite allows you to flourish. What's particularly insidious about this belief is how it can masquerade as humility, realism, or wisdom. I'm just being practical, you might tell yourself when you avoid opportunities. I don't want to get my hopes up too high, but underneath the reasonable sounding explanations, there's often this deeper and magical thinking that equates success with danger, good fortune with vulnerability. Your protective system needs to understand that success itself isn't what creates problems. It's how we handle success, the support systems we have in place, the values that guide us when we have more power or visibility. As an adult, you have resources for managing the challenges that can come with growth and achievement. You can learn to succeed in ways that feel sustainable and aligned with your values. You can build support systems that help you handle increased responsibility or visibility. You can develop practices that keep you grounded and connected to what matters most, even when external circumstances change dramatically. The paralysis isn't your enemy. It's been your early warning system, trying to keep you safely in the zone where life is challenging enough to feel real, but not so amazing that it triggers your deep fear of impending loss. Tonight, you can appreciate this protection, while also beginning to update your system's understanding of what safety actually looks like in your current life. Let your breath slow even further now as we approach the deepest layer of your protective system, the part that has learned, through experiences both large and small, that lasting good things might not be meant for someone like you. This third core belief often whispers, I don't deserve sustained happiness, success, or love. Good things might come to me temporarily, but they're not mine to keep. I'm fundamentally flawed in some way that makes lasting fulfillment impossible for me. This isn't usually a dramatic, conscious thought. It's more like a quiet undertow of unworthiness that pulls against your forward movement, creating paralysis, not from fear of success, but from a deep conviction that you're not the kind of person who gets to have what you really want. This belief often forms in the space between what you were told you deserved and what you actually received. Maybe you grew up hearing that you were special, talented, loved, but your daily experience told a different story. Maybe you were praised, but not truly seen, valued for your achievements, but not for who you were, loved conditionally based on your performance or behavior. Over time, you might have developed a split between your conscious understanding of your worth and a deeper, more primal sense that something about you is fundamentally insufficient. Sometimes this belief comes from experiences of having good things taken away repeatedly. Maybe every time you got attached to something, a friend, a home, a sense of security, a dream, circumstances conspired to remove it from your life. Maybe you learn not to get too comfortable with happiness because it never seemed to last. Your protective system, trying to spare you the pain of repeated loss, might have learned to create paralysis that prevents you from fully claiming or committing to good things in the first place. This unworthiness can also develop from comparison. Growing up in environments where other people seem to naturally receive things that remained elusive for you. Maybe siblings got opportunities you didn't, or classmates had advantages that felt mysterious and unreachable, or you watched others move through life with an ease and confidence that felt foreign to your experience. Part of you might have concluded that there's some essential quality others possess that you lack, some invisible membership card to the club of people who get to have sustained good things. Sometimes this belief is rooted in shame about parts of yourself you learned were unacceptable. Your sensitivity, your needs, your desires, your ways of being different from what your family or culture expected. If you internalized messages that core aspects of who you are were wrong, bad, or too much, you might have developed a sense that you need to fundamentally change before you can deserve good things. The paralysis becomes a way of avoiding the test. If you don't try for what you want, you don't have to face the possibility of being rejected for who you truly are. The cruelest aspect of this belief is how it can make you complicit in your own limitation. Instead of external forces keeping good things from you, you become the one who ensures they remain out of reach. You might work hard toward goals, but then stop just short of achieving them. You might attract loving relationships, but find ways to sabotage them before they become too meaningful. You might develop talents and skills, but then avoid opportunities to use them in ways that would bring recognition or fulfillment. This self-limitation can feel like protection because it gives you a sense of control over disappointment. If you keep yourself from fully going for what you want, you can tell yourself that failure was a choice rather than evidence of your fundamental inadequacy. The paralysis becomes a way of managing the terror that you might give everything you have and still not be enough. You might recognize this belief in the voice that tells you to be grateful for small things and not ask for more, to appreciate what you have without reaching for what you truly want, to be realistic about your limitations rather than optimistic about your possibilities. It sounds reasonable, even wise, but underneath it's often a deep conviction that you're not the kind of person who gets to have the life you secretly dream of. Sometimes this shows up as a pattern of self-sabotage right when things are going well, not because you fear success, but because some part of you can't believe you're actually allowed to keep it. You might find yourself creating problems in good relationships, making mistakes at work when you're up for promotion, or losing motivation for projects right when they start gaining traction. It's as if part of you is trying to restore the familiar reality where good things are temporary visitors rather than permanent residents in your life. This belief can also manifest as chronic undervaluing of yourself, charging less than you're worth, accepting less than you need in relationships, giving more than you receive until you're exhausted and resentful. If you don't believe you deserve abundance, you'll unconsciously create scarcity even when resources are available. If you don't believe you deserve to be prioritized, you'll accept being treated as an afterthought even by people who care about you. The paralysis this creates is particularly heartbreaking because it prevents you from even testing whether your beliefs about your unworthiness are accurate. By not moving toward what you want, you never get the chance to discover that you might actually be exactly the kind of person who deserves love, success, recognition, joy, and all the other good things that make life worth living. But here's what your protective system might not understand. Worthiness isn't something you have to earn or prove. It's not a limited resource that only some people get to have. It's not based on being perfect, having no flaws, or being better than others. Worthiness is your birthright as a conscious being who showed up to this life with unique gifts, perspectives, and capacity for love. The experiences that taught you to question your worthiness were about other people's limitations, not yours. The love that was withheld, the opportunities that didn't come, the recognition that was given to others. These things say nothing about your fundamental value and everything about the imperfect systems and people you encountered along the way. Your protective system learned to create paralysis, to spare you the pain of reaching for good things and being rejected. But in doing so, it also spared you the possibility of reaching for good things and being received, celebrated, supported, and loved for exactly who you are tonight. As you rest in the growing quiet of your mind, you can begin to offer this protective part some new information. You can show it evidence of your growth, your increased capacity to handle disappointment, your clearer understanding of your own value. You can remind it that you're no longer the young person who had to earn love through performance, who had to minimize yourself to fit into systems that couldn't hold your fullness. The paralysis has been trying to protect you from a pain that's already happened. But staying stuck also protects you from the joy, fulfillment, and love that are waiting for you on the other side of movement. Tonight, we begin the gentle process of helping your protective system understand that you are exactly the kind of person who deserves to keep the good things that come into your life. As you breathe slowly into this moment of deep relaxation, let's begin the most important part of your healing journey, learning to recognize your protective patterns with the gentle curiosity of a loving friend, rather than the harsh scrutiny of a critic. Recognition begins with developing what psychologists call observer awareness, the ability to step back slightly from your experience and notice what's happening without immediately trying to fix or change it. Think of it like becoming a compassionate anthropologist studying the fascinating culture of your own inner world. The next time you feel that familiar paralysis setting in, when you know you want to do something, but your body feels heavy, your mind grows foggy, or you suddenly become fascinated by tasks that keep you from moving forward, pause and breathe. In that pause, you might ask yourself, what is my protective system trying to tell me right now? What danger is it sensing? What does it need me to know? This isn't about analyzing or figuring everything out immediately. It's about developing a gentle curiosity about your own patterns. Maybe you notice that paralysis tends to happen on Sunday evenings when you're thinking about the week ahead. Maybe it shows up specifically around opportunities that would make you more visible. Maybe it emerges when you're about to do something your family wouldn't understand or approve of. Start to notice the physical sensations that accompany your paralysis. Does your chest feel tight? Do your limbs feel heavy? Does your head feel cloudy or spacey? These aren't symptoms to be eliminated. They're information from your nervous system about how your protective parts experience potential threats. Your body is constantly communicating with you about safety and danger, and learning its language is the first step toward collaborative healing. Pay attention to the thoughts that arise when paralysis sets in. You might notice familiar phrases. I'm not ready yet. I need to prepare more. This probably won't work anyway. Who am I to think I can do this? Instead of fighting these thoughts or believing them completely, you can begin to recognize them as the voice of your protective system doing its job. Notice also what triggers the paralysis. Is it thinking about certain types of success? Imagining specific people's reactions to your growth? Contemplating changes that would make your life different from your family's lives? The triggers often point directly to the core fears your protective system is trying to address. Sometimes recognition means catching yourself in the middle of elaborate avoidance strategies. You might notice that you've spent 3 hours organizing your email when you sat down to work on an important project. Instead of judging yourself for this procrastination, you can appreciate the sophistication of your protective system. It found a task that feels productive while keeping you safely away from whatever feels dangerous about the real work. Recognition also includes noticing when the paralysis lifts. What conditions allow movement to feel safe again? Maybe it happens when you're alone versus when others might observe. Maybe it happens when you frame the activity as helping someone else rather than advancing yourself. Maybe it happens when you lower the stakes or reduce the visibility of what you're doing. These observations give you valuable information about what your protective system needs to feel safe enough to allow forward movement. The goal in this recognition phase isn't to immediately overcome your paralysis, but to develop a more conscious, collaborative relationship with it. You're gathering intelligence about how your protective system operates, what it's concerned about, and what conditions help it relax enough to allow growth. As you practice this recognition, you might notice that simply being aware of the protective pattern without fighting it begins to change your relationship to it. When you stop treating paralysis as your enemy and start seeing it as communication from a part of yourself that's trying to help, the whole dynamic shifts. The paralysis doesn't have to work so hard to get your attention because you're already listening. Remember that developing this awareness is a practice, not a performance. Some days you'll catch the pattern early and be able to work with it consciously. Other days you'll find yourself 3 hours into avoidance behaviors before you remember to notice what's happening. Both are perfectly normal parts of the healing process. Tonight, as you rest in the growing quiet of your mind and body, you can appreciate every moment of awareness you've already developed. Every time you've noticed yourself stuck and wondered why. Every time you've recognized a pattern even after falling into it. Every time you've treated yourself with curiosity instead of criticism. These have all been steps toward the kind of conscious, collaborative healing that actually creates lasting change. The recognition phase is like learning to speak the language the protective system has been using to communicate with you all along. Once you understand what it's trying to say, you can begin to respond in ways that honor its wisdom while also updating its information about what safety and growth can look like in your life now. Now that you're developing the ability to recognize your protective patterns, the next phase involves something that might feel counterintuitive, developing genuine appreciation and compassion for the part of you that creates paralysis. This isn't about positive thinking or trying to convince yourself that your limitations are good. It's about understanding the intelligence and care embedded in your protective responses. Take a moment to breathe with this revolutionary idea. The part of you that keeps you stuck is actually one of the most dedicated parts of your psyche. It has been working tirelessly, often without recognition or appreciation, to keep you safe from experiences it believes could harm you. While you've been frustrated with your paralysis, this protective part has been vigilantly monitoring your environment, calculating risks, and intervening whenever it senses you're about to move into territory it perceives as dangerous. Imagine, if you will, that this protective part is like a devoted bodyguard who has been with you since childhood. This bodyguard witnessed every time you were hurt by taking risks, every time you were criticized for standing out, every time growth or success came with painful costs. Based on those experiences, it developed increasingly sophisticated strategies to keep you safe, and paralysis became one of its most effective tools. This bodyguard doesn't want to limit your life or keep you from happiness. Quite the opposite. It wants you to be safe enough to be happy, secure enough to grow, protected enough to take risks. But it's been working with outdated information about what constitutes safety and what kinds of risks you're equipped to handle. When you feel that familiar heaviness that prevents forward movement, you might try placing your hand on your heart and silently saying something like, "Thank you, protective part, for trying to keep me safe. I see how hard you've been working to prevent me from getting hurt. You've been such a faithful guardian." This isn't about agreeing with the paralysis or deciding to stay stuck forever. It's about acknowledging the care and intention behind the protection. You might feel emotional as you begin to appreciate this part of yourself. There can be grief in recognizing how much energy you've spent fighting against something that was actually trying to help you. There can be tenderness in understanding how young and scared this protective part might be, how it learned to be hypervigilant in environments where vigilance was necessary for survival. As you develop this compassionate relationship with your protective part, you can begin to have internal conversations with it. When you notice paralysis setting in, instead of pushing against it, you might try asking, "What are you worried about right now? What do you need me to know? What would help you feel safer about this step I want to take?" Sometimes the answers that arise can be surprisingly specific and helpful. Your protective part might be worried about a particular person's reaction, or concerned that you don't have adequate support systems in place, or afraid that success will bring obligations you're not ready to handle. Once you understand the specific concern, you can begin to address it directly rather than fighting the paralysis symptom. This compassion practice also involves appreciating the sophistication of your protective strategies. That elaborate procrastination isn't random. It's an intelligent system for keeping you busy while avoiding whatever feels threatening. That sudden illness or exhaustion when opportunities arise isn't weakness. It's your body's way of creating legitimate reasons to avoid what your protective system perceives as danger. You might begin to notice that your protective part has different comfort levels at different times. Maybe it allows more risk-taking when you're feeling particularly supported, or when the stakes feel lower, or when you've taken time to build up your resources. Learning to recognize these rhythms can help you work with your protective system rather than against it. Sometimes this compassion work reveals that your protective part is carrying burdens from much earlier in your life. It might still be operating as if you're the child who needed to be very careful about disappointing others, or the teenager who couldn't handle social rejection, or the young adult who didn't yet have the skills to navigate complex challenges. Part of building compassion involves helping this protective part update its understanding of your current capabilities and resources. You can also appreciate the ways your protective part has actually served you well. Maybe its insistence on thorough preparation has helped you avoid real problems. Maybe its resistance to certain opportunities has kept you from situations that really weren't right for you. Maybe its creation of delays has given you time to develop skills or resources you actually needed before moving forward. This isn't about deciding that paralysis is wonderful and you never want to change. It's about ending the civil war in your psyche, the exhausting battle between the part that wants to grow and the part that wants to stay safe. When these parts are fighting each other, paralysis is often the result. When they're collaborating, movement becomes possible in ways that honor both safety and growth. As you breathe with this growing sense of compassion for your protective part, you might notice a softening in your body, a relaxation in the chronic tension that comes from being at war with yourself. This softening is the beginning of integration, the process of bringing all parts of yourself into collaborative relationship. The goal isn't to eliminate your protective part or convince it to stop caring about your safety. The goal is to help it understand that you've grown, that your resources have expanded, that your definition of safety can evolve to include the risks necessary for authentic living. When your protective part feels heard, appreciated, and consulted rather than overridden, it becomes much more willing to support your growth rather than sabotage it. Tonight, as you sink deeper into rest, you can carry with you this new relationship with your paralysis, not as an enemy to be conquered, but as a guardian to be appreciated and gradually educated about the beautiful life that becomes possible when safety and growth learn to dance together. As your body continues to release into deeper relaxation, we arrive at the most delicate and important phase of healing, learning to move forward in ways that honor both your desire for growth and your need for safety. Integration isn't about forcing change or overriding your protective system. It's about finding a collaborative path forward that allows all parts of yourself to feel valued and heard. The beginning of integration often looks much smaller and gentler than you might expect. Instead of dramatic breakthroughs or sudden transformations, healing usually happens through tiny, almost imperceptible shifts that accumulate over time. Your protective system is much more likely to allow movement that feels gradual and reversible than movement that feels sudden and permanent. Think of it like learning to trust a very cautious friend. You wouldn't grab their hand and pull them into a situation they found frightening. Instead, you'd go slowly, check in frequently, and be willing to back up as they became too uncomfortable. This is how you want to approach collaboration with your protective part, with tremendous respect for its concerns and genuine willingness to move at a pace that feels manageable. These tiny steps might seem insignificant to your logical mind, but they're profound to your nervous system. Each successful micro-movement provides evidence to your protective part that growth can happen without catastrophe, that change doesn't have to mean abandonment of safety, that you can move forward while still honoring the wisdom of caution. Pay close attention to how your body responds to these small steps. If you notice tension, heaviness, or anxiety arising, that's valuable information that you're approaching the edge of your protective system's comfort zone. Instead of pushing through these sensations, practice pausing and breathing with them. Ask your protective part what it needs to feel safer about this particular step. Sometimes integration requires what we might call stealth growth, finding ways to move toward your goals that don't trigger your protective system's resistance. Maybe you can't imagine applying for a promotion directly, but you could ask for feedback on your current performance. Maybe you can't picture sharing your creative work publicly, but you could show it to one trusted friend. Maybe you can't envision leaving your current situation, but you could research alternatives just to gather information. Integration also involves learning to tolerate the discomfort that naturally accompanies growth, not the sharp pain that signals real danger, but the general unease that comes with expanding beyond familiar boundaries. Your protective system needs to learn the difference between this feels uncomfortable because it's new and this feels uncomfortable because it's actually dangerous. Building tolerance for growth-related discomfort is like building physical strength. It happens gradually, with rest between efforts, and with careful attention to not exceeding your current capacity. Some days, you might be able to take slightly bigger steps. Other days, you might need to move very slowly or even rest completely. Both are necessary parts of the integration process. One of the most important aspects of integration is learning to communicate with your protective parts throughout the process of change. Before taking any step forward, you might check in internally. How does this feel to you, protective part? What would make this feel safer? What support do you need for us to try this? And after taking action, you can check in again. How did that go? What did you notice? What would help next time? This internal communication helps your protective part feel like a collaborator in your growth rather than a victim of it. When it feels consulted and respected, it's much more likely to support your forward movement rather than sabotage it. Integration also requires developing what psychologists call window of tolerance, your capacity to stay present and grounded, even when experiencing the anxiety, excitement, or uncertainty that often accompanies growth. When you're outside your window of tolerance, your protective system takes over completely, often creating paralysis as a way to return you to familiar territory. Learning to widen your window of tolerance involves practices that help regulate your nervous system, deep breathing, gentle movement, grounding techniques, or any activity that helps you feel centered and present. The more skilled you become at self-regulation, the more your protective system trusts that you can handle the challenges that come with growth. Remember that integration isn't a linear process. You might make progress for days or weeks, then find yourself back in familiar patterns of paralysis. This isn't failure. It's your protective system's way of checking whether the new ways of being are really sustainable and safe. Each time you navigate these temporary returns to old patterns with compassion rather than self-criticism, you're building trust with your protective part. Sometimes integration requires grieving what you're leaving behind as you grow. Your protective system might need time to mourn the simplicity of staying stuck, the safety of familiar limitations, the identity you've held of being someone who struggles with movement. This grief is natural and necessary. Honoring it prevents the kind of internal rebellion that can recreate paralysis just when you think you've moved beyond it. As you breathe with these ideas, you might notice a growing sense of possibility, alongside any nervousness or resistance. This combination of excitement and fear is often a sign that you're at the edge of meaningful growth. Your protective system is scanning for dangers, while your growth-oriented parts are sensing opportunities. Tonight, you can rest in the knowledge that integration is already beginning. Simply by understanding your paralysis differently, by developing compassion for your protective part, by considering the possibility of collaborative rather than combative change, you've started a process that will continue to unfold naturally. As you sleep and dream, the movement you've been longing for doesn't require abandoning the parts of yourself that have been keeping you safe. It requires bringing those parts along as trusted advisors in your journey toward the life you're meant to live. Tomorrow, you might find yourself taking one small step, not because you've conquered your protective system, but because you've begun to earn its trust in your ability to grow wisely and safely. As you continue to breathe slowly and deeply, feeling your body supported completely by the surface beneath you, let's explore how your physical being holds the keys to sustainable healing from paralysis. Your body isn't just experiencing the effects of your protective patterns. It's an active partner in both creating and resolving the stuck places in your life. Your nervous system has been the primary architect of your paralysis, and it will also be your most important ally in creating lasting change. Unlike your thinking mind, which can sometimes override or ignore important information, your nervous system tells the truth about what feels safe and what feels threatening. Learning to listen to and work with your body's wisdom is essential for integration that lasts. The paralysis you experience often begins as a physical sensation before it becomes a mental state. You might notice your chest tightening when you think about taking a particular action, or your stomach dropping when you imagine a specific conversation, or your limbs feeling heavy when you contemplate making a change. These aren't random physical responses. They're your nervous system's way of communicating about perceived safety and danger. One of the most powerful practices for healing paralysis is learning to breathe with sensation rather than trying to breathe it away. The next time you notice your body responding to the thought of forward movement, instead of immediately trying to calm or change the sensation, try breathing slowly and steadily while staying present with what you're feeling. This teaches your nervous system that you can be with discomfort without being overwhelmed by it. Your breath itself is a bridge between your conscious intentions and your unconscious protective patterns. When your protective system creates paralysis, your breathing often becomes shallow, rapid, or held. By consciously returning to slow, deep breathing, you're sending signals to your nervous system that you're safe enough to relax, present enough to make conscious choices rather than reactive ones. Practice what therapists call somatic scanning, periodically checking in with different parts of your body to notice what they're holding. Are your shoulders tense? Is your jaw clenched? Is your belly tight? These physical holdings often correspond to emotional or mental holdings, places where you're bracing against life rather than flowing with it. Gentle awareness of these patterns, without trying to force them to change, begins the process of natural release. Movement, even very small movement, can be incredibly healing for paralysis patterns. This doesn't mean forcing yourself into vigorous exercise when you feel stuck. Instead, it might mean gentle stretching, slow walking, or even just shifting position consciously. Movement reminds your nervous system that you have agency, that change is possible, that you're not actually frozen even when you feel paralyzed. Pay particular attention to how your body responds to different types of support. Maybe lying on the ground feels more grounding than sitting in a chair. Maybe having your back against a wall feels safer than being in open space. Maybe wrapping yourself in a blanket creates a sense of containment that allows your nervous system to relax. These aren't trivial preferences. They're important information about what your body needs to feel safe enough for growth. Your protective system often creates what we might call energetic armor, chronic tension patterns that develop to shield you from perceived threats. This armor might show up as perpetually raised shoulders, protecting against attack from above, a chronically tight jaw preventing unwanted words from coming out, or a rigid spine creating the illusion of strength when you feel vulnerable. While this armor served important protective functions, it can also limit your capacity for the flexibility and openness that growth requires. Healing this armor doesn't mean forcing relaxation or trying to eliminate all tension. Instead, it means developing a conscious relationship with your body's protective patterns. You might try gently acknowledging tense areas. Thank you, shoulders, for trying to protect me. You can soften a little now. This kind of respectful negotiation with your body often works better than demands or force. Temperature can also be an important factor in nervous system regulation. Some people find that warmth helps their protective system relax. A warm bath, heated blanket, or cup of tea. Others find that coolness helps them feel more alert and capable. Cold water on their wrists, fresh air, or a cool cloth on their forehead. Notice what temperature conditions help your body feel most resourced and available for forward movement. Your body also holds what psychologists call embodied memories, cellular recollections of past experiences that continue to influence your current responses. Sometimes paralysis isn't just about current fears, but about your body's memory of times when movement really was dangerous. Gentle, patient work with these embodied memories, often through mindful movement, breath work, or somatic therapies, can gradually update your nervous system's threat assessment, create what we might call somatic anchors, physical practices that help you access states of calm, clarity, and capability. This might be a particular way of breathing, a specific posture that feels strong and grounded, or a gentle self-touch that communicates safety and support. When you feel paralysis beginning, these anchors can help you return to a more resourced state where conscious choice becomes possible. Notice how your body responds differently in different environments. Maybe you feel more capable of movement when you're in nature, or when you're alone versus with others, or when you're in familiar versus unfamiliar spaces. This information can help you design conditions that support your growth rather than trigger your protective system. Your body is also constantly giving you information about timing. Sometimes paralysis is your nervous system's way of saying not yet, indicating that you need more preparation, support, or simply rest before taking a particular step. Learning to distinguish between protective not yet and fearful never is an important part of working collaboratively with your body's wisdom. As you continue to breathe deeply tonight, you might notice places where your body is holding tension, or places where it feels particularly relaxed. Both are valuable information. The tense places might be showing you where you're still bracing against life, still protecting against threats that may no longer be relevant. The relaxed places might be showing you what safety and support actually feel like in your body, sensations you can learn to cultivate and return to. Remember that your body has its own timeline for healing, which may be different from your mind's timeline for change. Some patterns that took years to develop may release quickly with the right conditions and support. Others might take longer to shift, requiring patience and consistent gentle attention. Trust your body's wisdom about what pace of change feels sustainable and safe. Tonight, as you rest, your nervous system continues its natural healing work. During sleep, your body processes experiences, integrates new information, and often resolves tensions that felt stuck during waking hours. By approaching your paralysis with curiosity and compassion rather than force, you're creating the optimal conditions for this natural healing to occur. As your body continues to soften into deeper relaxation, let's explore one of the most complex aspects of healing from paralysis: how your growth affects the people around you, and how to navigate the relational challenges that often arise when you begin to move forward in new ways. One of the reasons your protective system learned to create paralysis in the first place was likely related to what happened in relationships when you tried to grow or change. As you begin to heal these patterns, it's important to understand that your movement forward might initially feel threatening or confusing to some people in your life, even those who love you and want the best for you. People often develop unconscious Agreements in relationships about who will play what roles, who will be the stable one, who will be the struggling one, who will need help, and who will provide it. When you begin to shift out of familiar patterns, these unconscious agreements get disrupted, and the other people in the system might unconsciously try to pull you back into the role they're accustomed to you playing. This doesn't mean that people in your life are intentionally trying to sabotage your growth. Most often, they're responding to their own protective systems, which might perceive your changes as threats to the stability or predictability of the relationship. If you've always been the one who needs support, your family might feel lost when you become more self-sufficient. If you've always been available to help others, friends might feel abandoned when you start setting boundaries to protect your own growth process. Your healing journey might bring up reactions in others that seem confusing or hurtful. People might make comments about how you've changed, express concern that you're becoming someone they don't recognize, or create drama right when you're making the most progress. Understanding that these reactions often come from their own fear of change or abandonment can help you respond with compassion rather than taking their resistance personally. Sometimes the people closest to you might unconsciously test your new patterns to see if your changes are real or temporary. They might push against your new boundaries, dismiss your growth, or create situations that invite you back into old protective patterns. Recognizing these tests as expressions of anxiety rather than attacks on your character can help you maintain your progress while also staying connected to people you care about. It's important to prepare for the possibility that some relationships might not survive your healing process. People who were only comfortable with the limited version of yourself might not be able to adjust to your expanded capacity and self-worth. While this can be painful, it's also evidence that your growth is real and meaningful. As you heal, you'll naturally be drawn to relationships that support and celebrate your wholeness rather than requiring your smallness. Communication becomes crucial during this phase of integration. You might need to have gentle but clear conversations with important people in your life about the changes you're making and what you need from them in terms of support. This doesn't mean demanding that everyone celebrate your every step forward, but it does mean being honest about your needs and boundaries as you grow. Some people in your life might be genuinely excited about your growth and want to support you, but they might not know how. They might offer advice when you need listening, or push you to move faster when you need patience, or try to protect you from challenges when you need to develop your own strength. Being clear about what kind of support actually helps you can prevent well-meaning people from inadvertently triggering your protective system. Your romantic relationships often face particular challenges when you begin healing from paralysis patterns. If your partner became accustomed to you being stuck or limited in certain ways, your growth might trigger insecurities in them about whether you'll still want the relationship as you become more empowered and capable. Open, ongoing communication about how you're changing and how much you value the relationship can help navigate these sensitive waters. Sometimes healing paralysis means recognizing that you've been staying stuck partly to avoid dealing with relationship issues that feel too challenging or risky. As you become more capable of movement, you might need to address problems in relationships that you've been avoiding, set boundaries that feel scary, or make changes that could upset the people you care about. This is often where your protective system might try to recreate paralysis to avoid the relational risks that come with authentic living. Family systems can be particularly reactive to individual healing because families often have the strongest investment in maintaining familiar roles and dynamics. Your healing might trigger anxiety in family members who are worrying about how your changes will affect the whole system. They might express concerns about your new phase or try to remind you of who you really are based on who you've been in the Past. It can be helpful to remember that you don't need anyone's permission to heal or grow. While it's natural to want the support and understanding of people you love, your healing doesn't depend on their approval or comprehension. Some people might not understand your journey until they see the positive results over time. Others might never fully understand, but can still maintain loving relationships with you if mutual respect exists. Building new relationships becomes important as you heal. As you become more authentic and self-aware, you'll likely attract people who appreciate and support your growth rather than feeling threatened by it. These new connections can provide evidence to your protective system that being your full self is actually safer and more rewarding than staying small. Support groups, therapy, or communities of people who are also committed to growth can be invaluable. During this process, being around others who understand the challenges of healing can normalize your experience and provide encouragement when the people in your existing life are struggling to adapt to your changes. Sometimes your growth will inspire growth in others. People who initially resist your changes might eventually become curious about their own stuck patterns and begin their own healing journeys. Your courage to move forward can give others permission to examine their own lives and consider what growth might look like for them. Remember that sustainable healing includes maintaining compassion for the people in your life who are struggling to adapt to your changes. They're likely dealing with their own protective systems that feel threatened by the disruption to familiar patterns. This doesn't mean sacrificing your growth to manage their anxiety, but it does mean approaching relationship challenges with understanding rather than righteousness. As you continue to rest tonight, you can hold the intention that your healing will contribute not just to your own well-being, but to the well-being of your relationships. When you become more authentic, self-aware, and emotionally available, you have more to offer in connection with others. The temporary disruption that comes with growth often leads to deeper, more honest, and more satisfying relationships in the long term. As your mind grows quieter and your body continues to release into peaceful rest, let's explore how the insights you're gaining tonight can be woven into the practical fabric of your daily life. Integration isn't just about understanding your patterns. It's about creating sustainable practices that support ongoing growth while honoring your need for safety and stability. The key to successful daily integration is starting so small that your protective system doesn't perceive threat. Think of creating what we might call micro-practices, tiny shifts in how you approach your days that gradually build your capacity for larger movements. These might be as simple as taking 3 conscious breaths before checking your phone in the morning, or pausing 4-5 seconds before automatically saying yes to requests from others. Morning practices can be particularly powerful for setting the tone of collaborative relationship with your protective system. Instead of immediately launching into your day's demands, you might create a brief morning check-in with yourself. How am I feeling today? What does my system need to feel supported? What would help me feel both safe and capable today? This kind of internal communication helps prevent the all or nothing thinking that often leads to paralysis. Throughout your day, practice what we might call conscious pausing, brief moments where you check in with your body and nervous system before making decisions or taking action. When you notice tension, heaviness, or anxiety arising, instead of pushing through or giving in completely, you can pause and ask, what is my protective system trying to tell me right now? What would help this part of me feel safer about moving forward? Create what psychologists call choice points, moments throughout your day where you consciously choose between old protective patterns and new growth-oriented responses. Maybe it's choosing to speak up in a meeting instead of staying silent, or choosing to take a break when you need one, instead of pushing through exhaustion, or choosing to pursue something you want instead of automatically dismissing it as impossible. Develop a personal safety toolkit, a collection of practices, objects, or thoughts that help you feel more grounded and resourced when you're approaching the edges of your comfort zone. This might include specific breathing techniques, grounding objects you can carry with you, supportive phrases you can repeat to yourself, or even phone numbers of people call when you need encouragement. Week progression can help you build momentum without overwhelming your protective system. Each week, you might identify one very small area where you want to practice moving forward differently. Maybe one week you practice speaking up once in meetings. The next week you might practice taking a few minutes for yourself each day. The following week you might practice saying no to one request that doesn't align with your priorities. Evening practices can help you integrate the day's experiences and prepare your nervous system for rest and renewal. You might spend a few minutes reflecting on moments when you moved forward despite feeling scared, acknowledging any progress you made no matter how small, and appreciating your protective system for the ways it supported you throughout the day. Learn to recognize and work with your natural rhythms. Some days, your nervous system will feel more open to risk and change. Other days, it will need more safety and predictability. Instead of fighting these rhythms, you can learn to dance with them, taking bigger steps when you feel resourced and resting, or taking smaller steps when you feel vulnerable. Technology can be both a support and a challenge in your integration process. Notice how different forms of technology affect your nervous system and your tendency toward paralysis. Social media might trigger comparison and inadequacy that activates your protective system. News might create anxiety that makes forward movement feel impossible. Alternatively, certain apps, podcasts, or online communities might provide support and inspiration for your growth process. Workplace integration requires particular sensitivity because professional environments often don't support the kind of internal process work that healing requires. You might need to create subtle practices that help you maintain your growth trajectory while navigating workplace pressures. This could include bathroom breaks for conscious breathing, walking meetings when possible, or brief grounding exercises. Between challenging interactions, physical environment can significantly impact your capacity for growth versus protective contraction. Notice which spaces make you feel more expansive and capable versus which spaces make you feel small or defensive. When possible, modify your environment to support your healing. This might mean rearranging your workspace, adding plants or meaningful objects, or creating a specific area in your home that feels particularly safe and supportive. Seasonal and cyclical awareness can also support your integration process. Just as nature has seasons of growth and seasons of rest, your healing journey will have natural cycles. There will be times when forward movement feels easy and exciting, and times when you need to focus more on rest, reflection, and building internal resources. Honoring these cycles prevents the kind of forced growth that often triggers protective backlash. Create accountability systems that support rather than pressure your growth. This might mean finding a friend who understands your journey and checking in weekly about your experiences, joining a support group for people working on similar patterns, or working with a therapist or coach who specializes in gentle, sustainable change approaches. Practice experimental living, approaching changes as experiments rather than permanent commitments. This can help your protective system feel safer about trying new things, because there's always the option to return to familiar patterns if the experiment doesn't work out. You might experiment with a new morning routine for a week, or try speaking up in meetings for a month, or explore a creative interest for a season. Build in regular integration check-ins where you consciously reflect on your progress, challenges, and what you're learning about yourself. This might be a weekly journaling practice, monthly walks where you reflect on your growth, or quarterly conversations with trusted friends about your journey. These check-ins help you stay conscious about your process rather than falling back into automatic patterns. Remember that integration is not about becoming a different person. It's about becoming more fully yourself. The goal isn't to eliminate your protective system, but to help it evolve into a more sophisticated and flexible ally in your growth. Your sensitivity, your awareness of danger, your capacity for caution. These aren't flaws to be overcome, but strengths to be channeled in service of your authentic expression. Celebrate micro victories regularly. When you notice yourself choosing growth over protection, even in small ways, acknowledge this consciously. When you feel paralysis arising but manage it differently than you used to, appreciate this progress. When you communicate with your protective system instead of fighting it, recognize this as evidence of your healing. These small celebrations provide positive reinforcement that helps sustain your motivation for continued growth. As you rest tonight, you can trust that integration is already happening. Simply by understanding your patterns differently, by approaching your protective system with curiosity rather than criticism, by considering new possibilities for how you might move through the world, you've begun a process that will continue to unfold in your daily life. Your unconscious mind is already beginning to imagine new ways of being that honor both your need for safety and your longing for authentic expression. Tomorrow, you might find yourself taking one small step differently, responding to one situation with more consciousness, or treating yourself with more compassion when you notice old patterns arising. These tiny shifts are the building blocks of lasting transformation, not dramatic overnight change, but sustainable evolution toward the life your soul most wants to live. As you rest here in the growing quiet of the night, feeling your body completely supported and your mind gently releasing the day's concerns, take a moment to appreciate the profound journey you've taken tonight. You began by recognizing yourself in the frustrating pattern of wanting to move forward but feeling inexplicably stuck, and you're ending with a completely different understanding of what that pattern actually represents. You now know that your paralysis isn't evidence of weakness, laziness, or character defects. It's evidence of an incredibly sophisticated protective system that has been working tirelessly to keep you safe from experiences it perceived as dangerous. This system learned, through your unique history, that movement sometimes comes with costs, potential loss of connection, exposure to criticism, or responsibility that feels overwhelming. Your protective parts developed paralysis as one of their most effective tools for preventing these painful outcomes. The three core beliefs we explored tonight: the fear that growth will cost you important relationships, the superstitious dread that success invites catastrophe, and the deep sense that you don't deserve lasting good things. These aren't random neuroses. They're intelligent conclusions drawn from real experiences in your life. Understanding their origins allows you to appreciate their protective wisdom, while also recognizing that the conditions that created these beliefs have changed. As you've grown and developed new resources, you've learned that healing doesn't require conquering or eliminating your protective system. Instead, it requires developing a collaborative relationship with it, treating it as a dedicated guardian who simply needs updated information about your current capabilities and circumstances. When your protective parts feel heard, appreciated, and consulted rather than overridden, they become allies in your growth rather than obstacles to it. The story of Maya, the artist who learned to hide her most powerful gifts to maintain social acceptance. Reflects your own journey of discovering how to express your authentic self without abandoning the wisdom of protection. Like Maya, you're learning that the paralysis you've experienced isn't your enemy. It's been your bodyguard, developed in response to real social and emotional dynamics you encountered along the way. Tonight you've practiced the 3 essential phases of healing: recognition of your patterns without judgment, compassion for the protective parts that create them, and gentle integration that honors both your need for safety and your longing for growth. These phases don't happen once and then you're done. They're ongoing practices that deepen your relationship with yourself and expand your capacity for authentic living. You've also explored how healing happens not just in your mind, but in your body, not just in isolation, but in relationship, not just in dramatic breakthroughs, but in the accumulated power of tiny daily choices. Your nervous system, your connections with others, and your everyday practices all become partners in your ongoing transformation. Perhaps most importantly, you've discovered that you don't have to choose between being safe and being authentic. The either-or thinking that creates paralysis. Either I stay small and keep my relationships, or I grow and lose connection. Either I remain struggling and familiar, or I succeed and face unknown dangers. Dissolves when you approach changes. Collaboration rather than conquest. Your protective system developed its sophisticated strategies over years or even decades. Healing happens gradually, with patience and gentleness toward the parts of yourself that are learning new ways of being. The micro movements, the conscious pauses, the internal conversations with your protective parts. These aren't small or insignificant practices. They're the foundation of sustainable transformation. As you integrate tonight's insights, remember that you're not trying to become someone different. You're becoming more fully yourself, the version of you that expresses your gifts, pursues your dreams, and engages in relationships from a place of authenticity rather than protective performance. Your sensitivity, your awareness, your capacity for caution. These remain valuable aspects of who you are, now channeled in service of conscious choice rather than unconscious limitation. The paralysis that brought you here tonight has actually been preparing you for this moment of understanding. Every time you felt stuck, frustrated by your own patterns, confused by your inability to move forward despite your desires, you were gathering the motivation and awareness necessary for real change. Your struggles haven't been wasted time. They've been essential preparation for the growth that's now becoming possible. You're part of a universal human story, the journey from unconscious protection to conscious choice, from reactive limitation to creative expression, from surviving to thriving. Every person who has ever grown beyond their early conditioning has walked a version of this path, has negotiated with their own protective systems, has learned to honor both safety and authenticity. Tonight, you join the ranks of people who understand that healing isn't about fixing what's broken, but about integrating what's been separated. You're learning to bridge the gap between the part of you that wants to grow and the part that wants to stay safe, discovering that these parts can work together rather than against each other. Rest now in the knowledge that this understanding will continue to work in you long after tonight is over. Your unconscious mind is already beginning to reorganize around these new insights, already starting to imagine ways of being that seemed impossible before you understood the intelligence in your own protective patterns. As your breathing continues to slow and deepen, as your body releases more completely into the embrace of your bed, let yourself sink into the profound relaxation that comes from finally understanding yourself with compassion rather than criticism. There's something deeply restorative about discovering that the patterns you've been fighting aren't enemies to be conquered, but parts of yourself to be appreciated and gently educated, your nervous system, which may have been on high alert for so long about the dangers of forward movement, can begin to relax tonight with the knowledge that growth doesn't have to mean abandonment of protection. The hypervigilance that's been exhausting you can soften as your protective parts begin to trust that you'll include their wisdom in your decisions, rather than overriding their concerns. Feel how your body is responding to this new understanding. Notice any places where tension that you've been holding for months or even years might be starting to release. That tightness in your shoulders that's been bracing against life's demands might soften as you realize you don't have to carry the burden of transformation alone. Your protective system wants to help rather than hinder your growth. Let your jaw release, allowing any words you've been holding back, any truths you've been afraid to speak, to dissolve into the quiet safety of this moment. You don't have to have all the answers tonight about what your life will look like as you heal. You only need to rest in the possibility that the paralysis that's been limiting you contains the seeds of your liberation. Your breathing is your guide now into deeper and deeper states of rest. Each exhale releases not just the day's tensions, but also the old story that you're somehow flawed or broken because of your struggles with movement. Each inhale brings in fresh possibility, new understanding, gentle hope for the changes that will unfold naturally as you learn to work with rather than against your own protective wisdom. As your mind grows quieter, you might notice thoughts arising about tomorrow, about the challenges you'll face, about whether this new understanding will make any real difference in your daily life. Let these thoughts be like clouds passing through the vast sky of your awareness, present but not permanent, noticeable but not demanding your engagement. Trust that your unconscious mind is far wiser and more creative than your conscious thinking. While you rest tonight, this deeper intelligence is already beginning to weave together all the insights you've gained, already starting to imagine new ways of responding to the situations that used to trigger paralysis. You don't have to force or figure out this integration. It happens naturally when you create the right conditions of understanding and self-compassion. Your body knows how to heal. Your psyche knows how to grow. Your relationships know how to evolve. The same intelligence that created the sophisticated protective patterns that have been keeping you safe is now available to create new patterns that serve both your safety and your authentic expression. You can rest in this trust, releasing the burden of having to orchestrate your own transformation. Feel yourself sinking deeper into the support beneath you, just as you're sinking deeper into trust in your own healing process. The bed holds your physical form, while your new understanding of yourself holds your emotional and psychological being. You are completely supported from all directions, by the practical structure beneath you, and by the compassionate framework of understanding you've built tonight. Let any remaining tension in your body be a reminder of how hard you've been working to protect yourself, how much care you've been taking to avoid being hurt. And let the growing relaxation be a preview of how different life feels when protection and growth work together rather than in opposition. This ease, this sense of being supported, this quiet confidence, these are available to you not just tonight, but as ongoing experiences as you integrate your healing. Your breath is becoming slower, deeper, more automatic as your conscious mind begins to step back and allow your body's natural wisdom to take over. This is the same kind of stepping back you'll learn to do with your protective patterns, not forcing them to change, but creating space for them to evolve naturally in response to new information and understanding. As sleep approaches, you might sense a different quality to your rest tonight. Instead of sleep being an escape from difficult realities, it can be a time of integration and healing. Your dreams tonight might reflect this new relationship with yourself, perhaps showing you images of movement that feels safe, of growth, that includes rather than abandons protection, of forward progress that honors all parts of who you are. The paralysis that brought you to this exploration tonight has actually been preparing you for this deeper rest. All the energy you've been using to fight against yourself can now be redirected toward healing and growth. The vigilance that's been scanning for dangers can now include scanning for opportunities, for support, for evidence that movement really can happen safely. Let your mind wander now wherever it wants to go, knowing that even your wandering thoughts are part of the integration process. Perhaps you're imagining what tomorrow might feel like with this new understanding, or remembering moments from your past with more compassion, or simply floating in the spacious awareness that comes when you stop fighting yourself. Whatever arises in your awareness can be met with the same gentle curiosity or learning to bring to your protective patterns. Nothing needs to be fixed, changed, or figured out right now. Everything can simply be witnessed with the loving awareness that recognizes all experiences as part of your unique journey toward wholeness. Your healing doesn't depend on your conscious participation tonight. It's happening in the spaces between thoughts, in the release of each exhale, in the growing quiet of your nervous system as it recognizes that you're finally treating it as an ally rather than an obstacle. This healing will continue in your sleep, in your dreams, and in the gradual shifts that will unfold in your daily life as your new understanding becomes embodied wisdom. Don't rest now in the profound relief that comes from finally making sense of patterns that have confused and frustrated you for so long. Rest in the growing trust that your protective system has your best interests at heart and can learn new ways of supporting you. Rest in the expanding possibility that the life you've been longing for might be closer than you ever imagined, waiting just on the other side of the paralysis that's been both your prison and your protection. As you drift towards sleep, carry with you the knowledge that you are exactly where you need to be in your healing journey. The struggles that brought you here weren't detours, they were preparation. The stuck places weren't evidence of failure. They were signs of a protective system so sophisticated in caring that it would rather limit your life than see you get hurt. Now that you understand this protection with appreciation other than resistance, movement becomes not just possible but inevitable. Not forced movement that creates more struggle, but organic growth that unfolds naturally when all parts of yourself feel valued and included in the process. Sleep well, dear one. Tomorrow is not a test of whether you've been fixed or transformed. Tomorrow it's simply another opportunity to practice the gentle collaboration with yourself that makes authentic living possible. Rest in trust, rest in hope, rest in the deep, knowing that you are worthy of both safety and growth, both protection and authentic expression, sweet dreams and gentle healing.